Alright everyone, so in this lesson we're doing the rotor wash effect. Basically we're going to create a repulsive force around the spaceship that's gonna push the smoke away. If you've taken my ocean course, we did something similar for the water. However, I was playing around and replaced the water with smoke, and I ended up getting something that looked super cool, so I thought, okay, I have to include this in the fire course as well. If I show you a different angle, I think you can only imagine the possibilities of everything you can create with this as far as smoke waves, shock waves. This could be snow in like an Arctic of the spaceship picking up some ice, and it could be volcanic ash of the spaceship flying above a volcano and picking up all this dirt. I pretty much really love just how symmetrical it ends up being on both sides. So you get these two waves and you can play with the camera angle. It actually looks pretty cool even from the front. So if I put the camera over here, I think you can only imagine the possibilities for everything that you can really do with a setup like this. I mean, look at that. That to me is pretty cool, and I think why we all love effects and simulations is stuff like this. So it's actually really simple to set up, and I'll show you different things that you can do with this setup. So let's set this up completely from scratch. I just have the spaceship animated to move forward. As always, you can use any object or model that you would like. I'm working in meters and one unit is 10 centimeters. So first let's create a grid around the spaceship. So just something like this for now. So we sort of cover the path of the spaceship. And then we basically need to have some of that smoke already waiting on the bottom. So for that, I'm just gonna create a standard box and just make a box on the bottom of this grid, something like this. And we're gonna fill that with smoke. So I'm gonna go right click, Phoenix FD properties, make it not a solid object. And again, object properties, make it not renderable. And actually, once again, object properties, and we can say display as box. Next, let's just create a standard Phoenix source and select the box as our source. For the temperature, I'm gonna do 350. Everything else can stay at default. Now, because we want the box to be filled with smoke, we don't want smoke to be emitted out of the box. I'm actually gonna set this to volume brush and set it to 100%. But I only want it to get filled with the smoke once. So we need to set auto key and set a key and then go to frame 1 and set this to 0. So it's actually only gonna get filled with the smoke on frame 0 and then just continue empty from there. For the grid settings, let's lower the resolution way lower. It's super high right now. So let's do something like maybe 3 million total cells, 0.4 meters resolution for now. I'm gonna do jammed minus on Z. I'm gonna say adaptive grid by smoke and 0.02 for the threshold. And then the maximum expansion, let's just leave it at default like this right now, and then we can play with that later. So buoyancy here will work in conjunction with the temperature. I actually ended up setting this to -1 just to make this look like a heavy smoke that ends up sort of falling more to the ground. Now conservation quality here really makes a big difference, especially because we want to get that beautiful symmetrical look on both sides and we want to see this rolling of the smoke on itself. So I'm actually going to raise the quality to 50 for now, then we're going to raise it to 100 and let's set it to PCG symmetric. And with all of these basic settings in place, let's just run the sim and make sure that it's actually working before we go further. And it seems to be working great. The box is filled with smoke in the beginning. And we don't have any force yet around the spaceship, but at least what we should see is that when the spaceship hits the smoke, it should interact with the smoke a little bit. Okay, so because we're only doing one step per frame, the smoke is not interacting with the ship as beautifully as it could, but already you're getting a nice sort of smoke trail. So you could do this for any kind of a low pass and maybe have some dust being picked up behind a plane. This kind of reminds me of Star Wars a little bit. So you could do a pretty cool effect just with a simple setup like this. Now let me raise the steps per frame to 2 and run it one more time just to see the difference. The smoke, now remember that the resolution is still super low, so you can basically see the cell size voxels here. It's really, really low, but still, I mean, you get a pretty cool effect with 5 minutes of work. Now, just so you guys know, you can always increase the amount of effect that an object has on the scene by right-clicking, going to Phoenix FD properties, and increasing this motion velocity effect. So I actually have it set to 0.5. If I set it to 2, we should see that the spaceship will have a much more drastic effect on the speed of the surrounding smoke. So as you can see, it's picking up all of this extra smoke here on the sides now. And basically the smoke around the spaceship is now going to be given twice the speed of the spaceship itself. It's basically a multiplier for how strong of an effect an object has on the scene. So it's always a cool parameter to play with. So we're getting a much stronger smoke wave now around the spaceship. So just to show you the difference that the motion velocity had, in the beginning we had motion velocity effect of 0.5, and then toward the end back here, this is where it switches on to 2, and you can see we're starting to pick up way more smoke, and we're creating this beautiful smoke wave behind the Starship, and we're not even using the repulsive force yet. So let's set that up next. So I'm gonna right click again, go to Phoenix FD properties, and set the motion velocity effect to a default value of 1. And we're gonna go under helpers, body force. I'm gonna select the body of the spaceship and set the strength to -2000 and the maximum distance to 15. As I taught you guys earlier, the body force is usually used to attract smoke to an object, but many people are not aware that you can actually make this a negative value. And you can use this to push away both smoke and water for water simulations. And the maximum distance is basically the maximum distance of the repulsive force. So if I were to set this to 200 meters, I would be pushing away everything in a 200 meter radius around the spaceship. So I'm actually only gonna set it to something subtle like 15 meters. I'm going to actually start the simulation on frame 8, so we're not wasting those extra 8 frames of wasted time. So under timeline, I'm just gonna set this to start at frame 8 and run the simulation from there. So I actually just made a mistake and I want you guys to learn from it. So because we animated the box to be filled with smoke on frame 0, I forgot that you actually have to run the simulation from 0 for the smoke to be there. So if we run the simulation from frame 8 like I did, there's actually no smoke in the box to begin with. So what you can do is either move the keyframe for the smoke to be born on frame 8, or you can just start the simulation on frame 0 like we did before. So I'm gonna do that and run the sim one more time. Alright, so our simulation is running and the smoke is already being pushed away by the spaceship. So I think that actually 15 meters is a little too high. So I'm gonna go back into the body force and set it to maybe just 5 meters. And I'm gonna reset the simulation and see what we get. Alright, so I'm running the sim and we're getting a different kind of interesting effect. Now the spaceship is being covered by the smoke. So basically it starts off looking pretty good. It's pushing away the smoke as expected, and then it just sort of gets encapsulated by the smoke, which is a pretty cool look on its own as well. But I think I'm gonna make the max distance maybe 10 and see if they'll push some of that smoke off the spaceship. Alright, so at maximum distance 10 meters we're getting a different kind of effect again. I really like the way it's pushing the smoke away. I think maybe there's a bit too much smoke on the floor to begin with. The box maybe is too high, so I'm just gonna lower the height of this, and I'm gonna move the spaceship a bit higher so it's not picking up all the dust to go above it. So really at this point you can just play around and see what kind of a look you like the most, what's the coolest. But this is pretty much the technique. Alright, so I ended up raising the spaceship a bit higher up, and then I also raised the quality of the conservation to 100. And we're getting that nice smoke wave look. Now you can of course just experiment with different objects and different kind of explosions and shockwave effects. So you can just make a sphere and put it in the middle of this smoke plane. So maybe something like that. You can just make that sphere your body force object. And now if I run the simulation, you can get some really cool sort of carpet bombing explosion slash shockwave effects this way. And it's just gonna slowly roll away from the sphere because the sphere is emitting this repulsive force. So this might actually be even cooler than the spaceship itself. Let me just hide the spaceship for now. And let's just focus on this shockwave. So this is actually a really cool shockwave that would be difficult to get any other way. I love how it sort of creates this pattern in the smoke, sort of like the impact. And then it just starts rolling away from the point of impact. So meteor hits, car explosions in the desert where you need maybe like a dust wave around the car after it explodes. All sorts of cool stuff that you can do with this. So I hope that you guys found this technique helpful. I can't wait to see what you make with this. And I will see you in the next lesson.